Welcome to Pine Thicket Philosophies, the non-podcast podcast where we do everything the podcast experts tell you not to do. If you are looking for a finely polished and professional podcast crew, well, folks, we ain't it. But if you want to virtually join a group of old outdoorsmen from southern Appalachia, as we sit around the fire and talk about any one of our favorite topics, we'll pour a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and enjoy. All right. It says recording is in progress. What's up, guys?
How's it going?
It's going.
Hey, pretty good.
It's going. So, welcome to our first official Zoom interview, I guess, with a superstar, an A-lister, a So we got Josh with us, who's one of our regulars. He's with us.
Howdy.
And then joining us is one of our semi-regulars, I guess you'd say, because I got to looking back today, and Dan and I have been on a few trips together now.
Yeah.
So it started back in July of 2019. Can y'all believe it's been that long? It's nearly 5 years since we went to the Bat Cave.
I cannot believe that.
And I was laughing about that just today, because I was thinking about mine and Josh's wives were in Myrtle Beach. And I talked to Shannon during the day, and I said, hey, I'm going to meet, this guy from from Decatur, and we're going to go paddle it, to the cave, to the Bat Cave. And she was like, who is this guy? I said, Southern Paddler. And she goes, who is this guy? I said, I don't know, Southern Paddler. I didn't even know your name until we met at the dam that day. And she was like, are you an idiot? She said, you don't even know this guy. And I was like, yeah, but I watch his videos all the time. We talk, we'll be fine, Yeah. And it just so ended up, Josh wasn't supposed to go, but something happened and you got off work early, and he piled in and went with us.
Actually, they made me mad at work and I just left.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
I was like, I'm out.
I remember that. I remember that from the video now, because we talked about it a little bit in the video. And then I guess the following May, we all and I actually posted a video. Where did Josh go? I posted a video a while ago on TikTok and Instagram of the three of us struggling to get up the mountain on hiking with As a Crow Fly, with Crow and Squidly.
Yeah.
And I remember we were about to die, and they were running up the mountain and setting their cameras down for us to walk by, and then they would run back down and get in line with us.
Yeah.
And but I posted that just a few minutes ago. So that was in May, and then we did the Cahaba Lilies trip.
Yep.
And
I didn't make it on that, unfortunately.
No, and then me and Dan did the we went this past summer when Dan went with us when we carried the ag teachers on the we got the three. Josh's phone's playing videos over there.
I'm watching what you posted.
Oh, well, turn the volume down.
I did.
But so we've done a few trips now. Is there any other trips that we've done?
I keep thinking about the Okmulgee trip with River King Pete, and you were invited on that. I think both of y'all were, but you couldn't make it.
I told Pete, I said, the only day that I can't go, I think it was April 27th, or it was the last weekend. It was the last Friday in April, whatever it was that year. I said, that's the only day I cannot go. Any other time I can make it work, but that one is out. And it was about 15 minutes later, he sent the text out, this is the date we're going. And I'm like, geez, dude.
It's funny that you mentioned the bat trip, which was the first time that, all three of us met. Because just today, Johnny, who went with us, we're still connected on Instagram. He mentioned me in a comment about bat caves and stuff on another guy, on David Parham's post, I believe, Huntsville Adventurer. But, it's funny, Brad, you talk about that trip. I distinctly remember that trip because, you said that was what, May of 19. I had just started my channel in January of that year. So I had just been making videos and uploading for, 3 or 4, 5 months at most.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that the two biggest influences in my video, my, YouTube career have been, of course, Pete Beck and you,
Right.
because y'all were the two that when I first started, when I dropped cable and then YouTube became entertainment, I just started looking up kayaking, and you were one of them I found, in canoeing. And I loved those BME trips, just a bunch of boy. And the greatest thing about it was when I started, because I've watched videos from a lot of guys, but when I saw your video, it's like, hey, I understand those guys, they talk like me. And then I realized you're only like an hour and a half east of me. So,
right.
But I by the time we met, I think I had already watched just about every video you had made. And so getting to meet you and Josh, and I was going to be really disappointed if you didn't make that trip, because I saw Josh as the funny one, the one that puts the trips together. But Josh was the one that really cracked me up.
Well, we sometimes we have another name besides funny for Josh, and we're going to keep it PG today, so we're not going to go there. But he knows what.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
But no, in all seriousness though, I do remember that trip, and I just remember being beside myself. I was absolutely thrilled to get to meet you guys and do a trip. And yes, that was a lot of fun.
That was a pretty good one. We need to get you. I don't think Josh, have you ever been to Nickajack? To the Bat Cave at Nickajack with us?
Yeah, I've been.
We need to get Dan up there. I mean, that's a long drive for you, but it's I like it better. I like it better than Gunnersville. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot more bats, and
it's easier to get to.
It is a lot easier to get to, and there's a whole lot less motorboat traffic.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. And there's a cool backstory to that I like to share with people when we go, and that's the fact that 3 days before TVA backed the water up in it, I believe it was in 1968, Johnny Cash went to that cave to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up getting saved in the back of that cave.
Wow.
And I've seen seen interviews and stuff with him telling the story of that. And when he crawled out of that cave, his mother and June Carter were driving to Chattanooga to try to find him, and saw his Jeep parked on the side of the road, and they had pulled over. And when he stumbled out of the cave, there they were, and it's just an amazing story. But that 3 days before TVA was set to flood that, and that's in his autobiography. It's a cool story to read. But cool. Anyway, let's get back to Dan. I got a couple of questions here. And then I want to get the inside scoop on this Suwannee trip.
All right.
We have been to where the Okefenokee empties into the Suwannee, and we keep talking about doing that trip. And Larry is, oh my gosh, he beats the drum every time we talk about going to the Okefenokee. And the one thing that has kept us from doing it is having to mess with getting a shuttle service and all that kind of stuff. And I understand we'll let you get to the story about the shuttle, the woes here in a minute, but you have paddled with some pretty big names through the years. I know that you've gone on a trip with Pete that I didn't get to go on. You've gone on a oh God, I cannot remember the guy's name. Paddle TV.
Ken Whiting.
Yes, Ken Whiting. And who were some other big names that you've paddled with?
Well, those were probably the two biggest. Yeah, I've done 2 trips with Pete because I did his member trip back in September, River King Channel membership trip. So twice with Pete and twice with Ken. And number 3 is probably Mountains and More. So
that's
awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome for you to say. But I
Well,
mean,
but let me put it this way, Brad, because I told you, and I mean, I was dead serious. When we did the Batcave trip, I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And it still was. Getting to meet you guys and all that. To add to that, the year later when you mentioned when we all camped, the Bama Boys YouTube camping trip.
right.
When we did that, that was the first time I had camped out of my kayak. I had, you mentioned the Suwannee trip. We'll talk about that in a little bit. 9 days living out of my canoe. But when we went on that trip, with all of us, that was the first time, the one that you put together, that was the first time that I camped out of a canoe or kayak. And so, I'm telling you, you've been very integral in my whole story of YouTube and adventures from, because you were the first one I met off YouTube, and you were the first one that I camped out of a boat with. So absolutely.
That's cool. I knew that you had told us that that morning while we were sitting around the fire, and I was like, what? I didn't have any idea, because you came in and handled it like a pro. I was impressed.
I was asking some questions. Absolutely. I was getting some help along the way.
Right. Well, who are some, who's somebody that you aspire to paddle with sometime that you would like to go on a trip with? I put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. I can't think of anybody offhand because, there's not like maybe a lot of big names that I really watch and think, oh, I'd like to paddle with them. But kind of like, you and I just on YouTube and Instagram, the people that I meet in social media, there's some really cool people out there, doing some great trips. I will say the first one that comes to mind, though, is probably Gatewood Brown. I've watched him for years. Again, he was an early influence as well. I think I would really enjoy getting to paddle with Gatewood. I think that would be fun. So
I've talked to Gatewood, quite a few times online. Of course, I've never got to meet him in person, but
right, I hadn't either, but hope to do that one day soon.
Right. What about you, Josh? You got anybody you would aspire to paddle with?
Well, being I don't do white water, it kind of limits it.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed the one time I did get to go with Pete when I bought a boat from him.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to go paddle somewhere good with Pete, maybe a camping trip, to do the members trip or something like that.
Yeah. I'd like for us to try to run up and do the members trip this year. I think this past year it was right. I can't remember. I had something going on and I just couldn't get away. I think I was booking. Oh no, I remember what it was. That was when wasn't it when I was waiting on a car to get repaired? It was currently in North Carolina.
Probably.
Yeah. So we were trying to juggle stuff around and get vehicles back, and we had an interesting year of travel this year at our house. I would have to, I don't know. I can't think of anybody right off. I would like to meet Gatewood. But I really can't think of any one person in particular. But I'll tell you something that I've always wanted to do, and I've always wanted to go to Canoecopia. And I know Pete's going to be there. Pete's going to be there this time, and I've just, I've looked at it year after year after year, and it's hard to make fit into my schedule because it's 2 weeks before my spring break, and that's always the busiest time of year for us at school. I mean, it's this year has been really rough with all the travel I've had to do with school and everything. So.
And let me add one more here too. Of course, and I don't think of these because these guys are just always, in my mind and on my screen. But I've got to mention Austin Wallace. He didn't get to make the Okmulgee trip, but Austin is definitely a guy. Again, I've watched most of his videos and Side Trail Adventures. Would absolutely love to meet him in person one day. And like we've talked a fair amount online, but definitely would like to meet Austin.
I got to meet Austin at when we went up in January. They had, I think it was Coffee with the King or something like that. Pete was at one of the big outdoor stores, and back in January 23, and Shannon and I drove up, and we just did some hiking and some touristy type deal things up there. But we went to that, and then afterwards, all of us that were thinking about going to the Yukon we all had a meeting, and Austin came, but he already had a big trip planned for 23, and he couldn't swing two big trips, so he didn't go with us to the Yukon. But funny story about Austin. He and I talked a good bit online, and I was looking for a Yukon. I had been looking for a Yukon boat for 2 or 3 years, and I found one in Arkansas, and it was going to be a 20-hour round trip drive to go get it. And the guy wanted, like, I think it was $900 or something like that for it. And I was like, look, I'm going to get this boat. It's the first one I've found, that somebody from North Carolina hadn't snatched up. I couldn't get the guy to message me back. Couldn't get him to message me back. I tried several times. So I finally just got aggravated and gave up on it. And I told Shannon, I said, I'll just wait. Sometime somebody around here will have one. They won't know what they've got. And I'll just have to be patient. About a week later, I'm at school one day and my phone starts blowing up. I'm getting tagged in all these comments on Facebook. And I was like, what in the world? Well, my kids left for, I had my plan time. So I looked at it, and Austin was like, don't Brad Moore live in Alabama? And all this. And I was like, what? And so I get to looking, and there was a boat for one of these Yukons for sale on Smith Lake.
Wow.
And I looked at it, and the guy wanted $300 for it. And I was like, so I just messaged him, and I knew all these guys from North Carolina were messaging him too. And I just messaged him. I said, hey man, I'm 2 hours away and I got cash. That's all I said. Well, he messaged me back and said, do you know where Sons of Arley is? And I thought, what in the world? Well, I just Googled Sons of Arley. It was a little bait and tackle shop down there on Smith Lake. And I said, yeah, of course. Isn't it at County Road, whatever. And he goes, that's it. Meet me there at 8:00 Saturday morning. Wow. So we literally did not hear anything else from this guy until 7:45 Saturday morning. And we're sitting, it's storming, and we almost didn't go because and
it was rough.
And Josh went with me, and we drove over there. And at 7:45, the guy texts me and goes, hey, are you still coming? I said, yes, sir, we're here. He goes, I'll be there in 5. He pulled up. I literally just looked at the boat, saw that it didn't have any holes in it, and paid him, and we left before he changed his mind.
Wow.
So, but thanks to Austin, that's the reason I got that boat.
That's awesome.
So, well, all right, Dan, tell us about this big trip, the trip down the Suwannee. Now, for the people that don't know, Josh and I have been to the Okefenokee 6 times, maybe 5 or 6 times. And
quite a few.
I think we have camped at every shelter in the swamp except Mixon's Hammock. And we are scheduled to hit that one this year. We've got the permit secured. If nothing crazy happens, we're scheduled to get to hit Mixon's Hammock this year. But the Okefenokee drains into the Suwannee. And then the Suwannee runs for 240 miles, 40-ish miles.
From the swamp, it may be the number 220 something was kind of in my head. But I think from the research we did, or from what I've heard, I guess if you start in the swamp, most people start at Stephen C. Foster State Park. Have y'all been there?
Oh yes, that's okay. We've put in there a couple of different times, and that's where we're going to be putting in on this trip.
Right. So I from the videos and like I said, all the things I've seen on paper, if you want to do the source to sea, you start right there at Stephen C. Foster, and then you can take it down to the Gulf. So, and from that point, that may be, I'm not 100% sure that distance from that point. So we did 220, and we started at Fargo, which is a little outside of the swamp.
Right.
I'd watched a few videos of people who did do the whole thing, starting at Stephen C. Foster, and one of them, and I don't know the guy, I didn't message him, but on YouTube, it's Radiant Adventures, and he did the whole thing starting at Stephen C. Foster, but he had to portage like 5 times before he got to Fargo. And so Charlie in our group, he had seen that too, and he's just like, I think we'll start at Fargo, skip all the portages, and then just go from there. And I like that plan. So but so on February 10th, we started in Fargo, Georgia. It was me and 6 others. We They were all from Alabama. We were from like Birmingham, Montgomery, and several from Mobile. I had paddled with everybody in that group except one guy, Alan. It was my first time to meet him, but he was a really nice guy. But the one that put it together, Charlie, he's kind of our group lead. He was the one that put together the Buffalo National River trip that I did 2 years ago. He was the one to put together the current river trip that I did last year. So this year, the big trip was the Suwannee River, kind of doing a not quite source to sea, but close to it. 220 miles is what we had scheduled. So we started talking about that back in the fall, I guess. And so when he put that together, I was like, yeah, I wanted to do it. And of course, and I started looking into it, and I thought, okay, the river itself is not really going to be just this stunning beauty like you're used to in the Ozarks. Those are my two big trips: the Buffalo National Current. I've done Jack's Fork up there near the Current River, so I knew it wasn't going to be that. But the fact that it was going to be the longest trip, because prior to this, my longest trip was the Buffalo National River, and that was about 130 miles, and we did that over 8 days. Well, we're going to double that time or double that length and only add one more day. And I thought, man, that's going to be challenging, especially as we get close to the Gulf, the river widens up, it slows down. So it was a fairly aggressive mileage schedule. When you divide it up, it only ended up being about 26 or 7 miles per day. But when you make reservations at these river camps, which are really nice, and I enjoyed staying there. We stayed at 2 of them. So to hit those, there's a couple of days where you end up short on mileage because you have to stop there, and then you get mileage a little bit piled up that you have to make up at the end of the trip. So days out of 9 days, days 7 and 8 were both 30-mile days. And that's when the river's at its slowest, and you can actually have tidal forces coming in off the Gulf that
right.
You have to work against. We didn't, fortunately. But the river was moving about 2.5 miles an hour, which wasn't real fast, but every little bit helps. But it was still, I took my 16-foot Old Town Saranac, and it's not a high-end canoe. It's a budget canoe, but it's a great one. I enjoy it. But I had way too much gear. I didn't weigh everything, but it was heavy. And I tell you, that's the hardest I've worked on a trip ever, Brad. About day 1 or 2, I was really regretting bringing that canoe. I was thinking, man, I should have brought my Old Town loon, but it's a 12.5-foot sit inside kayak. But after about day 3, it was still work, but I kind of got in the groove, and I was okay with it. I love the canoe for the comfort, the space, and the comfort. And now that I think about it, I'm not sure I could have been in that sit inside kayak for 9 days. I'm not in it as much because in the summertime I have a sit on top that I paddle. In the or when I have the chance, I use my canoe. So anyway, but the canoe did great. It worked out. Like I said, 9 days, 220 miles, and we hit 2 river camps. We stayed at maybe 1 or 2 other campgrounds. A couple of times we would just either find a place on the side of the river or stay at a boat ramp that had some open areas. But we had really nice weather. It was 60s, 70s during the day, most days, 40s, 50s at night. And then there was the last day, we had rain on Saturday, which was day 8, but it was mild, so I didn't mind it. Sunday, the last day, we had 20 miles to do, and we did 20 miles in pouring rain and like 47 degrees, and it was miserable. But we finished it. We started early, about 7:20, 7:30, and we were done by noon. But it was a very challenging trip, but extremely rewarding. And I think the thing that I'm most proud of is paddling that heavy canoe for 220 miles for 9 days straight. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that Shannon and I were watching it, and I was like, okay, just pay attention. Somebody was paddling beside you in a touring kayak.
Yep, that was Dawn.
And I was like, look at how easy she is paddling. She's just, I said, and Dan is keeping up with her in a canoe with all that gear. I said, he is working his tail off. I knew you had to be. How many pounds did you lose on that trip? You got any idea?
I didn't weigh, but easily 10 plus. Yeah. And I think I lost most of them in the first 3 days.
Yeah.
Because, your work, literally every stroke was was effort. There was very little, just kind of, because like you said, in a kayak, you can, once you get up to speed, you're just kind of maintaining whatever. Right. Dawn was in a 17-foot sea kayak, and that thing would fly. Mm-hmm. And now she was holding back most of the time, because we had Alan and Wes, or Wes, that that
I know Wes.
Him and Alan were the fastest, and they stayed in the front. Dawn and I stayed together, and then the other three were Charlie, Tammy, and Jerry, and they brought up the rear. Yeah, but so she was having to hold back, for me. But I was, like you said, every stroke was work, and so working that hard, I burned a lot of calories that week. And then also just not being able to run to the kitchen anytime I want to.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to plan your food, and you only eat at certain times. And definitely. So 10 or 12 easily.
Josh, they had 2 next go on the trip with them.
I did notice that.
So that's pretty cool. Josh and I both have next canoes, and we love them, but we're probably I'm going to carry. I think Josh is going to carry his big boat too. I think I'm going to carry my 16-footer, 16-foot Old Town when we go to the swamp this time, just so I can carry more gear. I think we're actually going to carry all the gear that I need. And running out of time. Upgrade now. No. Sure, I'll upgrade now. Anyway, I'm going to carry all the gear. And I think we're going to actually record some podcasts from the swamp.
Oh, that would be awesome.
So we're going to try to do some of that. So, tell us a little bit about I know that you mentioned a little bit about the kayak coming up missing, falling off of the trailer or whatever. How was that ever resolved? Has it been resolved?
Well, and so I will say I was kind of vague in the video because I didn't want to, I wasn't trying to run down the outfit or anything like that. But
accidents happen.
They do, sure. So we're going down the road, and the 2 guys in the back, one of them looked back and said, "Hey, we're missing a boat." And we'd been on the road for close to an hour, maybe a little less. But we'd already stopped once at a gas station and to get some drinks and snacks. And Wes, I believe, had said everything was on there when we stopped. So we had only been gone from the gas station maybe 30, 40 minutes. So when they noticed it, we doubled back, and everybody in the van's looking, both sides of the road. But it was on the passenger side of the trailer. So we was looking on that side, but couldn't find it. So apparently as soon as that thing hit the road, somebody snatched it up and they were gone. So we go by the outfitter. It was Tammy's boat, and they give her a replacement to use. I didn't really ask about any of the details, but I can tell from what Charlie said, because Tammy's Charlie's wife, and Charlie was our group lead. His indication was he was doubtful that he was going to get reimbursed for that boat, not because they denied any wrongdoing or anything like that. They admitted they messed up because basically it just wasn't strapped down. On those trailers, it was your typical canoe kayak trailer, and they had bungees. And for canoes, they're big enough to where, the bungees are going to put enough force on it. It's fine. But for canoes, you have to wrap that excess around the bars or do something. It just wasn't secured good. And at some point it just wiggled out. And she was in a 12-foot Pungo, which is Wilderness Systems. It's basically the same as an Old Town loon.
Right.
But it's just, it's a newer boat. It was slick, and there probably just was very little friction, and it wasn't tight enough, and it came off. And so I do know that Tammy has already bought her another one. She's got a replacement for it. As far as the outfitter, like I said, they were nice people. They really were. But I don't know how that's going to end up, to be honest, as far as money.
Right. That's sad. That's one of my fears of using a shuttle. Matter of fact, the only time that we have used a shuttle was 2019. We went down and did the Okefenokee, and we started on the northeast corner, and we went all the way through to the southwest corner, all the way through the swamp. And then we had to be shuttled all the way around. But what we did was we got there, and they had messed up and didn't have a driver ready for us when we got there. And so they had to call the driver. It took him a little while to get there. It was a little confusion. So what we did while we were waiting, we already had everything on my trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And so while we were waiting, we just took my trailer to their van. And just so everything, we knew how everything was strapped on and everything. And well, then they carried us up. Well, he asked me, he said, do you want me to just bring your trailer to pick you up at Stephen C. Foster? And I said, yes, I do. And so they probably used my trailer all week long while we were on the water, but that's fine. But when they came to pick us up, you know, he had my straps, he had everything. We just loaded on. They pulled us in the van back around to what's the name of the Okefenokee Adventures or something like that. It's the name of
Yeah, I
that.
think that's where it's at.
And then we literally just unhooked his van and backed my Tahoe right up to it, we were in the Tahoe then, and we took off.
After they got all of our boats loaded on that trailer, Wes Jones, his Yukon, which he was in, was on the top rack. He got up there and put his own cam strap around that thing to kind of as an extra measure.
Yeah.
And and nobody really thought much of it when he did it, but after Tammy's boat come off, now everybody's thinking, all right, I know what I'm doing next time.
Yeah. Yeah, I bought a set of those. I think they're called canoe locks. Lord, it starts with a K. You can't cut them. It's the straps. Kevlar, yes. And it's got the locks and everything. And I bought them before we carried mine up to North Carolina because we were going to have to stay in hotel and stuff overnight. Yeah. And with that thing sitting on the roof out in the parking lot, and I was like, oh, that made me nervous. But
I need to check into those because when Chris Piku, who lives here in town with me, when we went up to North Carolina to meet Pete for the member trip, we had the night before we stayed in a hotel somewhere up in Johnson City, Tennessee, or somewhere Kingsport, I don't remember, but my boat had to stay outside, on my truck, and I thought, man, I might have had some kind of lock on it, but yeah, that's just something when you're doing these trips, you have to think about that too. Is it okay, outside overnight?
right.
In a hotel somewhere.
Well, when Mitch Childers and Jack went to, they pulled a trailer from North Carolina all the way to the Yukon. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys that went with us had a 16-foot enclosed trailer. And so they built racks in that and just slid all the boats in up and then had all the floor to put everybody's gear on. And that's how they hauled everybody's boats up there, and everything was inside the whole time. Mm-hmm. He said the only time that was an issue was when they went across the Canadian border and they thought they were going to make them unload everything. But he said instead they just looked in and said, have you got any, guns or anything in there? And they were like, no. So, well, our dogs didn't hit on anything, so you're good to go, So, but that's, we've talked about rigging up something like that for these trips, but
and real quick, speaking of Mitchell, him and River Jim, Anthony Barber, I met those guys on the Cahaba trip that you put together. And then, of course, I did get to paddle with them again on the Okmulgee trip. But yeah, on your Cahaba trip, I got to meet those guys the first time. That was a lot of fun, cool experience.
Yeah. I've done several things with Anthony and Mitch, but I don't think I've done anything. Yeah, because I went up and did the New River with both of them, and then but Anthony and I did the Uwharrie through hike together.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun. Of course, we give Shane and Billy a hard time for doing their hiking in their F-150 so much. Right. We would get to the we would get off, run off, and leave them. And at the end of the day, we would come rolling into camp, and there they had set. At one time, one camp we pulled up to, and they were like, "Yeah, we've already ate." And I was like, "You've already ate? What?" And Billy goes, "Shane ate 5 hot dogs." And I was like, "You've already eaten 5 hot dogs, and we're still out here hiking?" He's like, well, I don't know how well y'all know Shane. He is a character now.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, Shane and Billy both. I would like to meet those guys sometime. Yeah, they seem like good guys.
All right. So how many, like, did you see a lot of wildlife, a lot of alligators and things like that on the Suwannee?
To be on it for 9 days and, most days, 7, 8 hours, we didn't see as much as we thought we would. We saw like a bazillion buzzards. So, and as a matter of fact, we saw so many, we looked up, why are there so many in Florida? And there are actually an unusually high number in Florida, but it's simply because of the warmer climate. There's more animals, more plant life. It's just the whole ecosystem just thrives more. So you will see a lot in Florida. And we did find out that they're federally protected because they're scavengers, and
Right.
they clean up nature. So we got to have that. But
Right.
no, we saw, some typical great blue herons, heard some gulls, saw some hawks. Only saw gators on 2 days. But I did see some manatees in
Yeah, I saw
manatee
that video. That made
yeah,
that.
that was cool. That was my first time to ever see any, and that was a really neat experience.
Yeah, I've only seen. I saw one when I was in college. We went to Wakulla State Park, and we saw one on a boat tour, and that's the only one I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And it was, they're really cool to see.
Okay.
All right, recording is in progress. All right, so we're back. I until we kind of get a grasp on how this goes, I didn't want to upgrade the Zoom until I kind of know if it's going to work. And so it cut us off at, I thought it was supposed to be an hour, but I think it cut us off at about 45 minutes. So this is episode 2.
I wonder if when me and you got on Zoom the other day, that ate up some of that hour.
It shouldn't have. We started this was a new meeting, so it shouldn't have. So
maybe it was just an hour total.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, all right. So we've kind of rearranged a little. Dan is now like straight across from me and Josh, so it's gonna look a little bit different, but that'll be okay.
Probably because he got on there before I did this time.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Early bird gets a worm. So. All right, so Dan has a couple of wildlife stories he was going to share with us from the Suwannee trip before we wrap up. So let's.
Yeah. I made 2 pretty big mistakes on this trip. Both of them I knew better than to do, but the first one I thought of when you asked about wildlife we saw. So one night it was like day 5, 6, or 7. I don't know. It's on into the trip, but I had a Sea to Summit dry bag. Matter of fact, I got it right here, and it's still got some of my leftover meals in it. And this is a brand new Sea to Summit, like a 60 liter or something. I got it with some gift cards that my sister got me for Christmas. And first time I was using it on this trip, and I had all my food in there. Well, it was mostly dehydrated stuff, so I didn't think about it being a big issue, but I did have my daily snacks and stuff was in there. Anyway, I go to my canoe one morning because I left it in there down by the river, and something had chewed a hole right there.
Oh, no.
Tore into that thing and got some of my snacks. So there's a $50 dry bag just gone. It didn't eat much, didn't mess up much on the inside, but the outside, just the fact that it ruined that bag really kind of hacked me off. But, I knew better than to leave food out there. But it was like day 5 or 6. And most times I think I did have it around me. But, that's another thing I learned about, having too much gear. Because if you have to portage or if you have a river camp where you have to walk a little ways, you got to move that stuff. So I'm definitely going to be more efficient and selective in my packing for my next big trip. But that was one issue. That was one mistake. The other one, so it was like the second night, and we were staying at Big Shoals. And it was getting close to dark. I was in kind of a hurry, wasn't paying attention, but I hammock camped the whole way down. And so I'm setting up my hammock, and I'm trying to do it before I run out of light. I had a headlamp, but really wasn't a need to be in a hurry. I just was not paying attention. So, but I get my hammock, set up, and once I get it strapped up, the first thing I do is sit in it to kind of tighten everything and see how it's going to sit. Well, as soon as I sat down in it, I heard this crack, and I looked, and the tree's coming down. I was like, "Look out!" And Dawn was sitting up, right there next to me, and And so it came up, it fell down, and I tied off to a dead tree. The thing was, I mean, completely rotten. Matter of fact, it was so rotten, it probably wouldn't have hurt me too bad if it had hit me, because when it hit the ground, it just shattered in about 5 or 6 pieces. But still, it was, it's 20 something feet tall. I just had not looked up and checked that thing. It looked good where I tied off, but thing was dead as a doornail. And so just one of those things where you got to always be paying attention. Things that sometimes you can still make those dumb mistakes.
Yeah, I showed that to Shannon. I think you put it on Instagram, and I showed it. I was showing it to Shannon, and she was like, "That's two of your friends," because Crow posted just the same that 2 days before that.
Oh
that
no!
he had set up during the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Got in late to camp, set up, and when he got up the next morning, as soon as he looked up, he was under a huge dead tree, and he was like, "This is the stereotypical widowmaker." And Shannon was like, "That's two of your friends that's done that in like the last 2 days." I was like, "Well, they've been hanging around me a little too much. It's rubbing off on them." So, but we talked in one of the earlier episodes of about how many times JR, he's the one that got all the rest of us into hammock camping, and he loves to make his own hammocks, but he has fallen out of his hammock. So it is a rare trip for him to stay in his hammock. Am I right, Josh?
That's true. It is true.
There will be times that he'll fall out twice a night. Like one time it had been raining. Thankfully, it was real muddy, and he had gotten up, to answer nature's call. And when he sat back down, he sat too far back in it, and it just rolled him right out. And there was a perfect.
I've done that.
There was a perfect 2-inch deep indention of his back and the back of his head in the mud, where he had just plump right down in the mud.
Y'all need to take better care of your camp cook.
Well,
I've seen his cooking. I would put a mattress under him or something.
He fell one night in the swamp. The end of his hammock just came loose, and it just fell. And we were on one of those big wooden platforms. And Josh will tell you, out in the swamp, it is totally black. You cannot see anything unless the moon is out, but it is like totally black. You can't see anything. And as soon as, somebody falls, I'm constantly going, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Nobody answered me. And I thought, oh, so I'm rushing around. I get up, and he is right behind me. Like, I mean, I could have just stepped on him. And I look, and he is laying there and has already gone back to sleep. He was like, it's about time to get up. I'll just stay here and sleep tonight. But he didn't never even answered me. He was back asleep. So,
which you did say on one of them big platforms in the swamp, they're not big.
Oh no, well, I meant to say wooden.
Yeah. They're sizable platforms, but you got to squeeze in there.
Yes.
Speaking of the swamp, you told me to get one of these, and I did.
Yeah.
Hey, those are nice. I've got one of those.
Yeah. Yep, I remember it must have been the I don't know if it was the Cahaba trip or maybe our camping trip, but you said, yeah, get you a thermocell, and I did. Yeah. I've used it a few times. It's nice.
Yeah, and I imagine along the Suwannee it was probably needed.
There was 2 nights where I didn't actually take it on that trip, but I did take my bug net for my hammock, which I had never used before, because most of my camping tends to be in fall, winter, and spring. I don't do a whole lot in the summer, but I didn't even take it on that trip, but I did have my bug net and needed it. There was a couple nights. One night I even put it up after I'd already turned in. It just the mosquitoes were so bad, I just had to put it up after I'd already tried to go to sleep.
Yeah, we on one of our trips, I can't remember which one it was. I got up and was trying to get my thermocell lit, and my arms were just covered with mosquito, and I was raking them off trying to get it lit, and I would get them swatted off, and then I jump back. We got all the thermocells lit, but to give them time to take effect, and then we jump back in our in our hammocks under our bug nets until they can take effect. But there's sometimes down there in the swamp, you'll lay there and you can't hear anything but the mosquitoes outside of your bug net, right, Josh? It's just
it's constant,
and sometimes it's hard to sleep. There's so many of them. But we usually go, during spring break, which it's still kind of cool up here in North Alabama, but down there, we may have 80-degree days. The first time we went, we left down there. We were all wearing shorts. It was 80 degrees. We got home and like froze to death because it was snowing by the time we got home, and we were all wearing shorts and t-shirts.
That's actually happened more than once.
Yep. Well, all right, Josh, you got any questions? You've actually been kind of quiet.
I've enjoyed listening to y'all talk about your trip. So I don't know. I can't think of nothing. Well, I mean, we'll have to go on a trip sometime this year, maybe.
Yeah. We'll try to get one planned.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get. I think it'd be kind of cool to take Dan, down the Flint and let him see how it's such a pretty river. Any time of the year you go down it.
I was going to mention that at some point. You beat me to it. I definitely want to go down to Flint with you guys. Absolutely.
Whenever we do that, we could even swing on over to Nickajack and hit it one day. Make it like a couple of day event.
Oh, that would be cool. Josh, I told Brad, it might have been on the ag teacher trip, and I said, Brad, I paddled with Pete Beck twice. I've paddled with Ken Whiting twice, but I've still been on 0 DME camping trips.
I know, ain't that crazy?
It is. I know it's a tight group. It's an elite group, but I'm still working to get in somehow.
Give
me a camp sandwich.
Yeah, camp
good
sandwich.
Stuff.
Good, yes. We have to kind of change the menu up a little on some of them though, because Josh's new dietary restrictions. Yep. Josh had contracted the alpha gal when we were on Cumberland Island, and so he's allergic to red meat now.
And that was an incredible story. I think you talked about it in your Pine Thicket Philosophies. Y'all talked about that one night. I remember listening to that. And of course, you and I had talked message before or something. I knew about it, but listening to that trip and that whole ordeal that was something else.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna step out here and go. I don't know if you saw the picture that I put in the Pine Thicket Philosophy of Josh before, and then compare it to Josh now. I'm not going to say it's been a bad thing for Josh, because Josh, I didn't realize Josh
was big.
Josh had gained a significant amount of weight, and he's a lot healthier now. He's a lot healthier now.
Well, my wife even said that it might have saved my life.
Wow. Yeah.
And I agree with her. It possibly did.
Yeah.
But I know, Brad, you mentioned earlier asking me how much I lost on the trip, and I did lose some. And I'm actually trying to maintain that or lose a few more, because I'm 53, and it gets harder and harder to get it off and keep it off, and and then it's just the extra weight. It's just more of a factor as you get older. So I'm trying to work on that myself.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to cut out the Dr. Peppers.
Yeah.
And trying to watch what I eat. I'm drinking I'm not a drinker. I don't drink alcohol at all. And it's not a judging anybody. Both of my grandfathers were horrible alcoholics, and I mean, just so it was just a choice. I never wanted to do that, just because I saw how it affected my parents and their siblings and everything. And so, but I can't imagine if alcohol is so addictive and drugs is so addictive, Dr. Peppers are hard for me to quit drinking. I mean, that and candy. I'm really bad about eating candy, but the main thing when I eat candy is the main time I eat candy is just when I'm road tripping, and I just try to keep myself from getting drowsy. I'm constantly eating jelly beans and all kinds of things. So, oh yeah,
sent a picture.
yeah, yeah. Did you get it, Dan?
Yeah, I did. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So, um, but I've actually made it to the gym 3 days this week, and that's a big accomplishment for me just in scheduling.
Yeah.
It's not because I don't want to go to the gym. It's just my schedule is crazy most of the time. But I've made it to the gym 3 days this week and plan to go in the morning. And
Nice. Yeah.
so,
but if y'all really want to slim up, I know a good diet. It's the Cumberland Island diet.
the Cumberland Island diet. I still want to go back to the Cumberland Island and ride bikes down there.
Yeah.
And, probably not camp on the island. Just go out for the day and do some stuff.
Stay out of the woods where the ticks are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, all right. How about Dan? You got anything? Well, you got any big trips coming up? You got any big trips planned for the year?
No, nothing big is coming up. Just kind of I'm right now just trying to get back to reality, 9 days away from everything. And I will say it was amazing at how fast that went by.
Yes.
I was really shocked, 9 days was gone. And I'm just like, wow, but it takes, this is the second week after the trip and I still don't feel completely acclimated back to reality.
I talked to Anthony Barber, River Gym. And I hadn't talked to Mitch a whole lot since we got back from the Yukon, just because I've been so busy and everything. I've talked to him online a couple of times, but Anthony said that it was about 3 weeks, and Mitch was still having a tough time getting back because man, he was on the water for 18 days.
Wow.
They did 420 something miles up there. I couldn't imagine. But my understanding is the part where I took off in Carmack, the next 2 days they said was the most beautiful part of the trip, and but to me the most beautiful part was the first 30 miles after we got off of the Lake Labarge. And that was when my video cameras, all of them were fritzing. I don't know what was going on. I got very little footage down through there. And it was just the one on the front just was not working at all. Next morning, it was working just fine.
Wow.
I don't know. But that was a beautiful stretch of the river. But Josh and we're going with some of our buddies. We plan on going down to the swamp at the end of the month. I don't know how we're just going to go down for a couple of nights. We're just going to kind of do an easy trip. Well, oh Lord, last time we said that.
Don't say that word.
But it's been.
Yay. I finally figured out how to get both of y'all on my screen at the same time. It was swapping back and forth between y'all whenever one of you talk. Right. Yeah, it was driving me up a wall.
But we're going down. But I've got a bunch of stuff I've got to do this year, but I don't have a whole lot of I want to do a lot more local stuff this year, just because last year I was so focused on the Yukon trip, and I didn't do a lot of local stuff. And so we're hoping to, and stuff with our teardrop. I haven't had the teardrop out. I carried it down on one of our truck camps, but as far as taking a trip like with Shannon and stuff, I haven't done that in over a year. And so we're wanting to do some of that and that kind of thing, but we don't really have a whole lot of plans for the year. as of right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I imagine, I think that there might be, I've got room in my schedule probably for one more, big, and by big I mean multi-day, possibly a week. I could, vacation wise, I could do another week-long trips at some point in the year, but yeah, right now nothing's planned, just kind of taking it week to week. And I tell you though, just getting right now, my focus, talk about getting acclimated back to work and everything, but getting these videos out. I'm right now working on part 4. And that's the first time I've ever had a video series that's more than 3. 3 was my longest, and I'm on 4, and this one's going to be at least 5. So
yeah,
it takes a lot of time.
I was going to say, nobody until they have done it knows
Yep.
how much time goes into
Exactly.
that, because you got to sit and watch all of the footage.
Yep.
Because as soon as you go, nah, I'm not going to watch all that. And then you get thinking after the video comes out, you're like, wait, there was a really good part that I didn't, so yes, I know it takes so much time to edit. I mean, I did a video for Jace's, our son's band, and it was a 4.5 minute long video, and it took me over 8 hours.
Wow.
Because of course it was them playing instruments, so you had to have the timing of the different clips just right and everything. So it was.
So did Jace do your channel trailer, your intro video, or the intro segment?
Zach, our oldest son. That's what he does for a living. He does.
Okay, that was fantastic. He did a bang up job with that,
and he was even playing the guitar on that.
Wow,
so he did the music too. So
oh yeah, that thing is spot on.
That's what he did for me for Christmas this year. And I told him, I said, listen, I'd rather have that than 100 times anything you could have bought me.
That was awesome. Really
but
was.
He does. Our oldest son Zach, he works for a nonprofit that raises awareness for IDF, which is a type of genetic disorder, and I can't really I don't know enough about it to really know what, but he is currently filming a documentary on it. He's been traveling all over the country. He called me one night or one afternoon and was like, hey, I'm currently sitting in Boston interviewing the lead geneticist for Harvard University. And he was like, do you know how intimidating that is?
I can imagine.
But he just got back from Houston today. He's been in Houston this week. But they're having a premiere of this documentary in Chicago sometime this summer. And I think we're going to try to go up to it. And I've never been to Chicago. And in all honesty, I'm not a city boy. I don't care a whole lot for Chicago, but this is going on up there, so I'm going to go. We may try to find something to do out in the country around Chicago area, but it's that is one trip that we have planned. So, all right. Either one of you got anything else you want to
add? I can't think of nothing.
No, but just other kind of like what I've said is just I do definitely want to go on record as just saying, man, I appreciate both you guys. It was a thrill meeting y'all, the first time, and I still enjoy following you on YouTube and Instagram, and hope we can do something again soon, because you were the first guys I met off YouTube, and then the first camping trip I did is just y'all are just like y'all are like family to me, in this whole camping and canoeing thing. It's been so much fun, and of course, and let me say too, I was absolutely honored and thrilled to be on your podcast here. That's so thank you for that opportunity. This has been fun.
I was throwing around. I was like, who do we need to get first? And I said, I just don't think we need to get anybody besides Dan. Dan needs to be our first guest, because if it goes south and we have to go redo it,
that's somebody to blame.
Well, no, I mean, if it doesn't work out, like cuts off in the middle of it, I said, Dan knows us well enough to know that, hey, that's just normal stuff for us.
Oh yeah, as soon as the screen went dead, me and Josh were texting like, "Hey, what happened?" I'm like, "We gonna do another meeting?"
Yeah. It just the time ran out, I guess, and so but, I'm probably going to end up having to upgrade my Zoom account so that doesn't happen. But until I kind of see how often we're going to do this, we'll just kind of keep it the way it is. So, well, all right, Dan, we appreciate you, and we'll try to get a trip up sometime this summer somewhere.
And let me know. Absolutely, anytime. Let me know.
All right, Josh. I appreciate you coming on and grinning a whole lot. You didn't say a whole lot, but you were
I
laughing.
Just like listening. I like listening. Cracks me up.
You were laughing a lot. So, all right, guys, I appreciate it. I'm fixing to stop the recording, and like we say in all of them, get out there and find your own adventure, because even bad adventures make great stories.
Absolutely.
Sure do. Sure do.
Thanks for going along with us today, guys.
All right. See ya.
All right, folks, thanks for tuning in for this episode of Pine Thicket Philosophies. Tune in next time as we continue to live by our motto, even bad adventures make great stories.